The moment I pushed open the door, the scene before me felt like a cruel joke. Linda was there, in the apartment we used to share. Her back arched slightly as she laughed at something Terry whispered into her ear. They didn't even notice me, standing there. Or maybe they did and simply didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. My hand tightened around the handle of the door, but my expression didn't change. I didn't shout. I didn't storm over and demand an explanation. I just stood still, watching the woman I had once believed would never betray me, laugh so freely in the arms of another man. Maybe I should have felt angry. Maybe I should have felt devastated. But all I felt was a strange emptiness, like something inside me had quietly snapped. I closed the door behind me, not too loud, not too soft, just enough for them to finally glance my way. Linda's smile froze mid-laughter. Terry's arm slowly dropped from around her waist. His face twisted, as if he was struggling to decide between playing innocent or acting defiant. I didn't give him the chance to choose. My gaze swept over them, not lingering, not accusing, simply moving on. I walked past them without a word, each step feeling lighter than the last. Maybe because in that moment, I realized I had been carrying the weight of this relationship alone for far too long. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Tiffany, Linda's best friend, standing awkwardly by the window. She had probably come here to find me, maybe to warn me, maybe just to bear witness. Her eyes met mine, wide with disbelief and something else I couldn't quite place. Impulse drove me. Without thinking, without hesitating, I closed the distance between us and kissed her. Right there, in front of Linda, in front of Terry, in front of everyone who had doubted me. Tiffany gasped softly against my lips, frozen in place, while Linda's expression shattered completely. She stumbled a step forward, her voice caught in her throat. But I had already made my choice. If betrayal was the language of this room, then I had finally learned to speak it fluently. Welcome to Story Heaven. Please stay with us till the end of this story. Every part is filled with emotion that you won't want to miss. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your comments mean so much to us and inspire us to keep bringing you even better stories. Every like and share motivates us to keep creating heartfelt journeys just for you. Thank you for your support and enjoy the full story. Tiffany's lips were soft, warmer than I expected, yet there was a trembling hesitation in her breath. I felt it even through that brief, impulsive contact. When I finally stepped back, her wide eyes stayed locked on mine, not in fear, but in silent question. Maybe she wanted to ask why I did it, or maybe she already understood. I didn't give her time to speak. My gaze slid past her and landed on Linda. For a moment, the whole room was so quiet I could hear the uneven rhythm of Linda's breath. Her lips were parted, her face pale, as though she couldn't decide if she was more horrified or furious. Terry was no better. He took a step away from her, then caught himself, forcing a mocking smile onto his face like it could somehow erase what had just happened. I didn't bother sparing him another glance. My attention stayed on Linda. Her eyes were the same eyes I used to look into every morning, the eyes I used to believe held my future. I knew those eyes better than anyone. I had memorized the way they softened when she smiled, the way they darkened when she was lost in thought, the way they flickered when she was lying. And right now they were flickering so wildly it almost looked like she might burst into tears. I didn't care. Not anymore. Linda and I had been together for almost 4 years. 4 years of quiet mornings, shared meals, late-night conversations that lasted until dawn. I had loved her with a steadiness that even I didn't fully understand. It wasn't the kind of love that burned fast and bright, threatening to consume everything in its path. No, my love for Linda had been slow, patient, built day by day, moment by moment. I had trusted her in the same way a man trusts the ground, beneath his feet, without ever thinking it might give way. She wasn't always like this. The Linda I had fallen for was warm, ambitious, full of life. She had dreams bigger than the city skyline, and a smile that could chase away any storm cloud hanging over me. When she laughed, she did it with her whole heart, as if the world itself was a joke meant only for her. I had loved that about her, that reckless joy, that untamed spark. I wanted to protect it. I wanted to be the man who would keep that light burning, no matter what. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. It wasn't sudden. It never is. It started small. Missed calls, unexplained absences. Her laughter, once so genuine, grew hollow. Her touch, once filled with warmth, turned cold. I told myself it was stress, work, life, maybe even exhaustion. We all go through rough patches, I thought. We all lose our way now and then. So I waited. I waited, hoping she would come back to me. I did everything I could to remind her of what we had. Candlelit dinners at home, weekend getaways, little notes tucked into her bag, wishing her a good day. I even learned to cook her favorite meals from scratch, just to see that spark of happiness flicker in her eyes again. And sometimes, just sometimes, it worked. She would smile at me like she used to, and for a fleeting second, I believed we were okay. But love isn't supposed to feel like a fight you're losing every day, and yet I fought, because I was stubborn, because I was foolish. Because I still believed in the Linda who once whispered to me under the stars, promising forever. Now, looking at her standing frozen in front of me, I finally saw her for who she really was. Not the woman I had built my dreams around, but a stranger wearing her face. A stranger who didn't flinch when she betrayed me, but faltered only when I turned my back. Terry shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between Linda and me. He tried to muster some bravado, but it fell flat in the heavy air. He cleared his throat like that would somehow make things better, but it only made him look smaller, more pathetic. I could have said something then. I could have lashed out, demanded answers, accused them of every lie they thought they had hidden from me. But what was the point? Exposing their betrayal wouldn't change the truth. It wouldn't undo the choices they had already made. So I stayed silent. Tiffany, who had been holding her breath the entire time, finally exhaled softly beside me. Her eyes were still wide, her cheeks flushed from the kiss. She looked like she was caught between shock and something deeper, something unspoken. But she didn't move away from me, not even an inch. Linda's hands balled into fists at her sides. She took a shaky breath and forced herself to speak. "Richard, it's not what you think," she started, but even she didn't sound convinced. I tilted my head slightly, my eyes never leaving hers. "No?" My voice was calm, steady, almost indifferent. "Then tell me, Linda, what exactly is it?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat worked in silence, her lips trembling. I waited, giving her all the time in the world, but nothing came. Only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. That was all the answer I needed. Linda still hadn't found her words. She stood there frozen, as if the air had thickened and trapped her where she stood. Her eyes kept darting between me and Tiffany, like she was trying to decide which fire to put out first, but it didn't matter anymore. Whichever way she looked, the damage was already done. For a brief moment, I wondered if she felt any real regret. Not the kind that comes from being caught, but the kind that eats away at you when you finally understand what you've lost. I searched her face for a trace. Of that, just a flicker of real remorse, but all I saw was panic. She was terrified, not because she had hurt me, but because her carefully spun lies were unraveling faster than she could catch them. Terry stepped forward, his voice forced into something that almost sounded casual. "Richard, let's not make this more complicated than it is." His eyes, though, betrayed his unease. They couldn't meet mine for more than a second before flickering away, like even looking at me was a reminder of his guilt. "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice quiet but heavy with weight. "Was it complicated when you decided to betray your friend? Or was it simple?" His mouth opened, but no defense came. He knew the answer as well as I did. Tiffany stood perfectly still beside me, as if moving would shatter the fragile balance of the moment. Her gaze never left Linda, who looked at her now with something between accusation and desperation. There was history between them, years of friendship, secrets shared late at night, trust built over time. But in this instant, all of it cracked beneath the weight of unspoken truths. Linda's voice finally found its way out, small and brittle. "Richard, it's not what it looks like. Terry and I, it just happened. It just happened." Such a simple phrase for something so destructive. I let the words hang in the air, feeling their weight settle into my chest. I wondered how many times people in her position had said the same thing, believing that it could somehow erase the pain they caused. But it didn't erase anything. If anything, it carved the betrayal deeper. I kept my expression unreadable. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not here. Not now. "It just happened," I echoed softly, my gaze steady on hers. "Was it an accident, too? Like slipping on ice? Like a storm you couldn't control?" Her lips parted, but she couldn't answer. She lowered her eyes, ashamed or maybe just unwilling to face me any longer. Terry shifted again, as if the silence made him more uncomfortable than the confrontation itself. "Richard, listen. I didn't mean for this to happen. You know how things get sometimes." He tried to force a laugh, but it died in his throat when I met his eyes. I wanted to laugh at his pathetic attempt to downplay it. How things get sometimes? As if betrayal was a natural occurrence, like rain in April or leaves falling in autumn. But I stayed quiet, because no words could capture the cold detachment that had already taken root inside me. It wasn't sadness that filled me anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was a hollow, chilling clarity. The woman I had once planned a future with, the friend I had once trusted with my life. Both of them stood before me, exposed and desperate, their excuses falling flat against the weight of reality. They had chosen each other long before I ever walked through that door. Maybe they thought I'd never find out. Maybe they thought I was too blind, too trusting. Maybe they just didn't care. Linda took a step toward me, her hand, reaching out as if to close the unbearable distance between us. "Richard, please. You have to believe me. I never meant to hurt you." Her voice cracked at the edges, almost breaking. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at her hand as though it were something foreign, something I no longer recognized. "You already did," I said quietly. Her fingers trembled before they fell to her side, defeated. The room felt suffocating, filled with all the words left unsaid, all the lies that had festered in the shadows. My gaze flicked once more, to Tiffany, who was still watching Linda, her expression tight with something that looked like conflicted pain. Her voice, when it came, was barely more than a whisper. "Linda, how could you?" It was a question that didn't need an answer. Even Linda knew that. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of it, her once proud posture crumbling into something pitiful. I could have walked away then. Maybe I should have. But something held me in place. Not hope, not longing, just the quiet need to see this through to its bitter conclusion. Terry finally spoke again, though his voice lacked the bravado it once held. "Richard, let's not turn this into a scene." I turned my eyes on him, steady and cold. "You already did." His mouth snapped shut and he said nothing more. Linda's breath hitched, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She swallowed hard and tried once more. "Please, Richard." But I didn't answer her. My silence was all the response she deserved. I thought that after seeing the truth with my own eyes, something inside me would collapse completely. That maybe I'd feel rage tearing through my chest, or grief so sharp it would bring me to my knees. But all I felt was a suffocating numbness, as if my heart had simply decided to stop reacting. I was standing in the middle of the storm, but I couldn't feel the rain. I didn't understand myself. For so long I had braced for this moment without even knowing it. I had ignored every sign, pushed away every instinct that warned me something was wrong. I told myself Linda wouldn't do this to me. She couldn't. We had built too much together, survived too many storms. But even the strongest structures crumble when the foundation rots away, and I had been too blind to see the cracks. Spreading beneath my feet, a tightness grew in my chest, something heavy and bitter. It wasn't anger at Linda or even at Terry. It was anger at myself. How could I have been so naive? How could I have loved someone so deeply, only to end up here, watching her scramble for excuses she didn't believe in herself? I thought about the nights I stayed up waiting for her messages that never came, convincing myself she was just tired, overworked, preoccupied. I thought about the mornings when I kissed her goodbye, not knowing she had already drifted away from me, further than I could ever reach. All those moments, once precious, now felt like cruel reminders of my own foolishness. My chest tightened further, the pressure building until it felt like I could barely breathe. But I forced myself to keep my expression neutral, to let none of it show on my face. Not here. Not in front of them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Linda's eyes searched mine desperately, as if she could still find a piece of the man who once adored her without question. But that man felt like a distant stranger now, someone I could barely remember. She opened her mouth as if to speak again, but no words came out. Instead, her lips quivered, and she looked away, unable to hold my gaze any longer. For a heartbeat, I wondered if she truly regretted what she had done, or if she simply regretted getting caught. The answer didn't matter anymore. Either way, it was too late. A quiet voice in my mind whispered that maybe, if things had gone differently, if she had confessed before I saw it with my own eyes, I might have forgiven her. But that was the kind of thought that belonged to a past version of me, the man who still believed in her. That man didn't exist anymore. Tiffany shifted beside me, her posture stiff, her expression caught between sympathy and sorrow. Her eyes flicked toward Linda briefly, then back to me, as if silently asking what I was going to do next. But I didn't know the answer. I felt like I was walking a tightrope high above the ground, with no safety net below. One wrong step, one wrong word, and everything would come crashing down. But maybe it already had. Maybe this was just the quiet moment after the fall, when all that was left was to dust yourself off and walk away from the wreckage. The weight in my chest refused to ease. It sat there like a stone, heavy and cold. I wondered how long it would stay lodged inside me, how many days or months or years it would take before I could breathe freely again. My thoughts spiraled, questions chasing each other endlessly. Had it always been Terry? Were there others before him? Had Linda ever truly loved me, or was I just a convenient placeholder until something better came along? No matter how I tried to push the questions away, they clawed their way back, relentless and sharp. I clenched my fists at my sides, not out of anger, but to steady myself, to keep my body from betraying the turmoil inside me. I couldn't fall apart here. Not now. Not while they watched. Terry avoided my gaze, his eyes fixed on some invisible point on the floor. He looked like he wanted to disappear, to melt into the walls and vanish from this unbearable confrontation. But there was no escape for him, not from me, not from the truth. Linda took another shaky breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "Richard, I didn't mean for you to find out like this." Her words struck a nerve I didn't know was still raw, so it wasn't about the betrayal itself, only about me discovering it. That small admission stung more than all her silence combined. Throat felt tight, like there was something caught there, a word or a scream or maybe just all the things I wished I had said sooner, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to remain still. I looked at her one last time, really looked, as if to burn the image into my memory so I would never forget the moment I finally saw her for who she truly was. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling, her shoulders slumped under the weight of her own choices. Somewhere deep inside, a bitter realization settled over me. The woman I had loved didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. Maybe I had fallen in love with a version of her that only existed in my imagination, shaped by my hopes and my blind trust. The truth was painful, but it was freeing, without another word. I turned away from her, from both of them, and felt the first breath of true freedom fill my lungs. It was sharp, cold, but it was real. Just as I turned to leave, it should have ended there, clean and final. But fate rarely allows clean endings. As I reached for the door, a voice rose behind me, sharp and trembling, like the last desperate thread of a fraying rope. "Richard, wait!" Linda's words scraped the air, clawing for my attention, but I didn't pause. My hand was already on the door handle, already twisting it open. I wanted nothing more than to step out of that room and leave her and Terry behind. Forever, like the broken fragments of a dream I no longer cared to piece together. But then Tiffany spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, yet it cut through the tension like a blade. "Richard, she's lying." I stopped. My grip on the door handle tightened, my knuckles whitening. I could feel every beat of my heart in my chest, loud and unforgiving. Slowly, I turned my head, my eyes meeting Tiffany's. She stood stiffly, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her gaze locked on Linda with a mixture of pity and disgust. Linda flinched at Tiffany's words, her composure cracking further, her lips parting as though to protest, but no sound came out. Tiffany didn't wait. She stepped forward, her chin lifted slightly, her voice growing steadier with every word. "It wasn't just Terry. There were others. You deserved to know." Her confession dropped into the room like a stone into still water, sending ripples through everything I thought I had already accepted. My chest felt tight again, not with grief this time, but with something colder, something sharper. I thought I had already reached the end of my pain, but Tiffany's words showed me there was still more depth to fall into. Linda's face drained of color. She shook her head weakly, desperation clouding her eyes. "Tiffany, no. Don't do this." "But..." Tiffany didn't stop. She looked directly at me, her gaze unwavering. "I wanted to tell you before, but I didn't have the courage. I thought maybe you would be happier not knowing. Maybe you would forgive her and move on. But after today, you deserve the truth." My breath caught in my throat. My mind tried to reject her words, to push them away like a nightmare I could wake from. But deep down, something told me Tiffany wasn't lying. She had nothing to gain from this. If anything, she stood to lose a friend, to entangle herself deeper into a mess she never asked for. Linda's voice cracked as she finally found it again. "Tiffany, stop." Her hands clenched into fists, her body trembling. But Tiffany pressed on, her words relentless. "You trusted her, Richard. You trusted her with your whole heart, and she threw it away long before you walked into this room today, long before Terry." I felt something inside me unravel, a thread pulled too tightly for too long. All those restless nights, all those moments I had doubted myself, wondering if I wasn't enough, if I had somehow failed her, every one of them came flooding back with brutal clarity. Linda staggered forward, tears slipping from her eyes, her voice ragged. "Please. Richard, don't listen to her. She's trying to turn you against me." But she was too late. The truth had already been set loose, and there was no pulling it back. I watched Linda now, not with heartbreak, not with anger, but with a hollow kind of understanding. Tiffany's words filled in all the empty spaces, all the gaps in Linda's stories that I had ignored for so long. It was like seeing a puzzle finally come together and realizing the picture had been broken from the start. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "Is it true?" My voice came out low, steady, but laced with finality. Linda's lips trembled, her eyes shimmering with panic. She opened her mouth to deny it, but no words came out. Her silence said more than any denial ever could. Tiffany's eyes softened, her voice gentler now, almost a whisper. "It's true." The weight of it settled over me like a heavy shroud, suffocating and cold. But strangely, I also felt something else beneath the pain, a flicker of relief. The uncertainty that had haunted me for so long was finally gone. There were no more shadows, no more doubts, only the clear, brutal light of truth. Without another word, I let go of the door handle and turned away from them both. I didn't need to hear any more excuses. I didn't need to see Linda's tears or listen to her pleas. I had seen all I needed to see. I had heard everything I would ever need to hear, and finally, I could let it all go. As I stepped away from the door, Linda's voice chased after me, raw and desperate. "Richard, please listen to me. I can explain." But her words tangled in the air, too late, too hollow. Explain? After everything, after Tiffany's confession peeled back the last mask she wore, what explanation could possibly exist? What twisted logic would make it better? Even if she invented the most convincing story, the truth had already wrapped itself around my chest like chains, and no words from her mouth could loosen them now. Her footsteps hurried behind me. I could hear the panic in every uneven beat of her approach, like she still believed if she could just catch up, she could rewind everything. She reached out, her fingers brushing my arm, but I didn't flinch. I simply kept walking, not even sparing her a glance. That's when she broke. Her knees buckled as she crumbled to the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her tears falling freely. She wasn't crying out of guilt. She was crying because she had lost control, because no matter what she did now, she couldn't pull me back into her grasp. "Richard, I love you," she whispered, as if those words could still hold power. But love isn't enough, not when trust has been shattered into pieces too sharp to hold. I paused, just for a heartbeat, the weight of her confession pressing against my back like a gust of cold wind. Slowly, I turned around and faced her. Her eyes, swollen and red from crying, clung to mine with desperate hope. For a brief, strange moment, I almost pitied her. But pity isn't love, and pity isn't forgiveness.
"You say you love me," I said quietly, my voice carrying the weight of every sleepless night, every ignored instinct, every moment I had convinced myself to keep believing in her. "But you never respected me. Not once." She flinched as if my words
Had slapped her across the face. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away, still clinging to the fraying edges of denial. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said, her voice cracking. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, cold and sharp. "No, Linda. It happened exactly like this because you chose it. Every single time you lied to me, every moment you spent with someone else, you chose it." Her chest heaved with sobs, her hands trembling in her lap. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. I thought maybe you'd leave me first." That pitiful excuse hung between us like poison in the air. She had betrayed me not out of accident, but out of fear. Fear that I would do to her what she had already done to me. Fear that had driven her into the arms of others before I ever had the chance to prove her wrong. My chest felt hollow, scraped clean of whatever love I once carried for her. It was as if my heart had burned everything to ash, and now there was nothing left but silence. Behind me, I could feel Tiffany watching, her presence quiet but heavy. She hadn't spoken again since her revelation, and she didn't need to. Her truth had already changed the course of everything. Linda's head dropped into her hands as she wept, her whole body trembling like a fragile leaf caught in the wind. For a moment, I wondered if I should feel satisfaction, seeing her like this, watching her unravel beneath the weight of her own choices. But there was no victory here. Only emptiness. Slowly, I shifted my gaze to Tiffany. She met my eyes without hesitation, something steady and unwavering in her expression. I wondered if she expected me to fall apart, to collapse under the weight of this moment, but I didn't. I couldn't. Maybe I had already done all my grieving long before this day arrived. A long silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, until Terry, forgotten, insignificant Terry, finally found his voice. His words came, out hoarse and uncertain. "Richard, man, I didn't mean for things to go this far." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the cowardice in his eyes. He wasn't sorry. Not truly. He was only sorry that he had been caught. That the comfortable lie they had both been living in had been ripped apart by the harsh glare of truth. You never meant for things to go this far, I repeated his words back to him, tasting their emptiness. But you still let them. He had no answer. None that mattered, at least. Turning away from both of them, I took a steady breath, filling my lungs with something that almost felt like freedom. I was done with them. Done with their lies, their excuses, their cowardice. Done with being the fool who loved too deeply and trusted too blindly. But just as I moved toward the door again, Tiffany's voice rose softly behind me. Richard. There was something in the way she said my name, something that made me pause. I turned to her, finding her eyes clouded not with pity, but with something more complex, something that felt like understanding. You don't have to walk away alone, she said, her voice gentle. Her words hung in the air, an unexpected offering in the midst of the wreckage. For a heartbeat, I wondered if she meant it as comfort or as something more. But either way, the sincerity in her gaze didn't waver. Linda's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face twisted in disbelief. Tiffany, she choked out, her voice raw. You! Tiffany cut her off without raising her voice, her calm piercing through Linda's hysteria. You threw him away, Linda! You threw him away long before today! Linda's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had no defense left, no shield to hide behind. For a moment, none of us moved. Time seemed to fold in on itself, compressing into the narrow space between choices already made and consequences finally faced. Then, looking back, I crossed the room, closing the distance between Tiffany and me. She didn't flinch as I came closer. Instead, she met me with quiet strength, her gaze steady, her presence unwavering. In front of Linda, in front of Terry, in front of every shattered piece of my past, I did the only thing left to do. I kissed Tiffany. It wasn't like the first time, full of impulsive fire and raw defiance. This time, it was deliberate, certain, a quiet declaration that I was done with the past, that I would not be defined by betrayal or regret. Linda let out a strangled sound, something between a sob and a gasp, but I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. Terry turned away, shame painting his face as he stared at the floor, and as I pulled back from Tiffany, she looked at me, not with fear or doubt, but with quiet, unwavering resolve. In that moment, something inside me finally, truly broke free. I realized I wasn't the victim of this story. I was the one writing its ending. As I stepped away from Tiffany, I could still feel the soft imprint of her lips lingering on mine. Not like a mark of defiance anymore, but something gentler, something final. I didn't need to look at Linda to know she was watching every second of it. Her silence was louder than any scream. Her expression, a perfect blend of disbelief and devastation, told me everything I needed to know. It was over. Not just the relationship, not just the illusion, but every chain that had kept me bound to her, every memory that had once felt too precious to let go of. In that moment, all of it crumbled to dust. I turned my back on her, not as an act of cruelty, but as a quiet mercy for myself. For too long, I had been a prisoner of love that was never real to begin with. Now, I was free. Terry made a weak attempt to speak, but the words caught in his throat, swallowed by the heavy tension in the room. He couldn't meet my eyes. He didn't dare. Good. Cowards rarely survive the weight of their own guilt. I reached into my pocket and pulled out something they didn't expect to see. The apartment keys, still warm from resting against my skin. I had carried them every day, even when I suspected the truth, because a part of me wasn't ready to let go. But today was different. Today, I was done with holding on to ghosts. Without a word, I tossed the keys onto the table between us. They landed with a sharp clatter, cutting through the thick air like a final verdict. Linda's eyes widened. She must have realized what I meant without me needing to say it out loud. This place, our place, no longer belonged to us. It no longer belonged to her. She opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came. Even her voice, once so skilled at weaving lies, had abandoned her. I didn't care about the apartment, not really. It wasn't about the space or the walls. It was about the message. I was leaving it behind the same way I was leaving her. Completely. Without hesitation. Without looking back. As I walked toward the door, Tiffany followed me without a word, her steps quiet but certain. I could feel her gaze steady on my back, not pressing, not demanding, just present. She didn't try to console me, and for that, I was strangely grateful. There was nothing to console. I wasn't broken. I wasn't mourning. I was alive. More alive than I had felt in years. Linda's voice finally cracked through the silence, hoarse and desperate. "Richard, you can't just leave." I didn't stop walking. "Richard!" She called again, her voice rising with panic. "Don't do this!" But I had already done it. Long before I walked through that door, I had made my choice. It just took seeing her for who she truly was to finally follow through. As I opened the door, I caught Tiffany glancing back one last time. Her eyes, sharp and clear, landed on Linda with a cool finality. Then she turned away, stepping into the hallway beside me without hesitation. We walked away together, step by step, as if shedding the past with every stride. Outside, the air was crisp and clean, untouched by the poison of betrayal that still clung to the apartment behind us. I drew in a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, letting it settle into every corner of me that Linda's lies had once suffocated. Tiffany stood quietly beside me, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. She didn't rush me. She didn't fill the silence with empty words. Instead, she just stood there, steady and calm, a quiet presence in the storm that had finally passed. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, breathing in the freedom that tasted almost unfamiliar. Then softly, she broke the silence. "You're stronger than you think, Richard." Her words weren't meant as flattery. They were a simple truth, one I had long forgotten, beneath the weight of loving someone who never deserved it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw in her eyes a kind of honesty I had been starved of for far too long. She didn't pity me. She respected me. And that difference mattered more than I could explain. A small, tired smile curved my lips. "Maybe," I said quietly, "but not strong enough to see this coming." She shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "No one ever does." Her answer settled something inside me. Maybe she was right. Maybe no one ever truly sees betrayal before it happens. But what mattered wasn't the fall. It was what came after. As we walked away from that place for the last time, I felt something unexpected rising within me. Not bitterness, not regret, but a quiet, growing resolve. I wasn't going to let this be the story people remembered about me. I wasn't going to let Linda's betrayal define my life. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. But unlike her, my path wasn't paved with lies. The next few days unfolded like a quiet storm. I didn't hide from the fallout. I faced it head on. I canceled every shared account, severed every lingering tie, and watched as Linda's carefully curated world began to collapse without my silent support holding it together. Word of what happened spread faster than I expected. Mutual friends, business acquaintances, even distant relatives who had once admired our relationship, they all learned the truth. And when they did, they stopped looking at me with pity. They started looking at me with respect. Tiffany stayed by my side through it all, not as a crutch, but as a quiet pillar of strength. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't expect anything. But in her presence, I found a strange kind of peace. Linda, on the other hand, wasn't so fortunate. Her facade crumbled as quickly as her excuses. People began to distance themselves from her, whispers following her wherever she went. She tried to salvage her image, tried to cling to the shreds of her old life, but it slipped through her fingers like sand. And Terry, he faded into the background like the shadow he had always been, left with nothing but regret and the cold sting of irrelevance. As for me, I built something new from the ashes. I didn't rush. I didn't chase after distractions to fill the void. I took my time, rediscovering the parts of myself that had been buried beneath years of silent compromise. I found joy in the small things again. Morning walks, quiet cups of coffee, conversations that didn't revolve around lies. Tiffany and I didn't label whatever it was between us. We didn't need to. What we shared wasn't born out of desperation or revenge. It was something quieter, deeper, something real. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I finally understood what freedom truly felt like. It felt like standing tall without the weight of someone else's betrayal pressing down on my shoulders. It felt like breathing without fear of being suffocated by lies. It felt like looking forward instead of looking back. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Tiffany stood beside me on a quiet balcony. Her eyes were soft, her smile genuine. "You've come a long way," she said. I glanced at her, my heart steady. "We both have." Her gaze held mine for a long, quiet moment. Then, without a word, she reached out and took my hand. No promises, no grand declarations, just simple, honest connection. And in that moment, I knew I had won. Not because I had hurt Linda in return, not because I had sought revenge, but because I had found peace, and she would never know that feeling again. That was the real victory, and it was mine.